Hey folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple review, and it's this huge monstrosity Tainted Grail for today. This is a huge Kickstarter from Awakened Realms that has been sweeping the globe now, and a lot of people have been going crazy for it. This giant, epic adventure campaign game that you can play solo or in a group, where it kind of plays on a very much more gritty and dark feel of the Arthurian legends. You know, taking some elements from the folklore, but also changing it up a little bit in places, you know, for a new audience. And essentially, what you are is like a side character. You're not one of the famous knights or any famous heroes, you're basically this person on the side who, you know, has to chase after well, actually I don't want to get into plot spoilers, but let's just say you're not one of these like go-hard and veteran warriors or anything, you're just this other person. But you have to travel across the landscape of Avalon whilst everything's kind of going to pot with the wordness, I think it's called, but basically just, you know, weird magic gribbly stuff. And as you're going through this campaign, you meet lots of famous characters, you interact with other people through the use of a exploration journal, so kind of like a choose your own adventure style book. You've got to worry about your health, your sanity, you combat monsters, you enter diplomatic relations with allies, or, you know, diplomacy encounters, like trying to talk your way out of a bad situation. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in this game, and certainly from a production standpoint, it was quite an extensive Kickstarter and made a ton of money. Now, for transparency's sake, you know me, I talk honestly about every game, my honest opinion. So just because this is a Kickstarter does not mean that I'm going to give it any, like, you know, more favor just because I spent money on this one. And I did. I went in for an all-in Sundrop pledge. So I went in quite expensive with this. I've got more stuff coming in Wave 2 shipping. Basically, I've got the base game and some other miniatures with it, and they're in Sundrop painted format. But regardless of this, I'm going to talk honestly about my views on this game, both the pros and the cons, because there's certainly both of those in this game. So what am I referring to specifically? Well, let me talk about it in some detail. I know there's quite a bit of detail to cover in a short time. First of all, the duration. This game can kind of take as long as you want it to, really. It has a save function where you can basically save your progress as you go along. So I've got my save sheet here. It's got the statuses that you get, you know, like say, something is watching, you know, the guest of honor, or helping the knights, you know, that kind of thing. Every time the story says, oh, you complete this objective, you tick it and it just keeps it on track. But the rest of it is basically recording your character sheet and some notes and stuff like that. You could probably come up with your own better version, but this is decent enough and there's plenty of these in the box. But how long you play the game? It's entirely up to you. Do you want to play through a whole chapter, which might take you anywhere between 45 minutes to 2 hours? Or do you want to play just for an hour, just while it's on the table, and then save it and then carry on? It's entirely up to you. So the duration is basically whatever you want to make it. The ease of play is a little bit hit and miss, but there's some very high positives with only a couple of really small negatives. The small negatives is that even though the rulebook is pretty decent, there's quite a lot of stuff you've got to absorb here in terms of terminology and little fiddly rules with, you know, certain aspects like combat and that, where it's like, oh yeah, I need to remember about this. So there will be a bit of rules checking, and the rulebook is, unfortunately, mostly text. You know, it's not a bad rulebook per se, actually, and there are some pictorial examples, especially with combat, and thankfully combat is the one thing that needs to be explained quite heavily in here. But when you look at the rest of the book, it's a lot of text, isn't it? There's not a huge amount in the way of pictures, and that's not particularly helpful when you're trying to go back through the book, but it's certainly not the best when you're trying to explain it to others as well, or more likely to reference a rule yourself. I find myself having to rules check quite often in this game. However, on a more positive note, there is a tutorial mode in a separate little booklet that takes you through kind of like a mini scenario. It doesn't spoil the actual plot. It kind of just takes you through a few turns, but it talks you through every step. Drawing a card, the start of the day, the end of the day, a combat situation, you know, the menhirs that you've got to look after, which are these giant, ridiculous models that you have to, that statues that basically kind of, they're meant to protect the world, but they're kind of on the blink. That's the story behind them. And it talks you through everything, your character sheet, items, the lot. It is a fantastic tutorial. I mean, there is no point anybody on the internet really coming up with a playthrough video for this game, because frankly, the tutorial is better. The tutorial is really that good. I basically just sat down, got the I didn't even have to set anything up. You know, unwrap the stuff out of the box, get it in the box, you know, ready to be played, and then you just start with the tutorial. And it will tell you, go grab these, you know, now do this turn. Right, now as you go to here, you'll flip this and you'll see this. It just talks you through every single step. Now, it won't teach you every single rule in the game, unfortunately. You do have to go back to the rule book and preferably, I would say, read the rule book first and maybe do the tutorial, or maybe just do the tutorial and then skim through the rule book, you know, to get the bits that you've missed. But it's a very effective way to get started in this. I used it and would not, you know, I would not say you should approach this game in any other way. Don't just read the rule book and then go for it. I really recommend use the tutorial, and I think more games need to use these. They need to use them, whether it's a Euro game or an adventure campaign game. Tutorials are good, okay? So, moving on to the T for tactics and strategy, this is where there's a little bit more of a hit and miss issue. Now, the favourite thing in this is combat. The combat in this is really cool. You have two different decks, combat and diplomacy. So there's a combat one and there's a diplomacy one as well. And they consist of all of these different cards, which can be made up of, eventually, as you upgrade your deck throughout the campaign, stuff to do with your character, but you also have some generic ones that start off in your deck. And the idea is that with these cards, as soon as you come across an encounter, on the side of the card there's these things called keys with different symbols based on your attributes. And the idea is that you play a card kind of, I can't really show it on the camera very well, but especially with the flare from the sleeves, but you essentially play them side by side in order to join up the various keys. They're not a panoramic picture per se, but by joining up the keys, you get to, you know, progress through the combat, or you get to draw more cards or trigger other effects, and it's a very neat system. A little long-winded at times though, because, you know, when you do the combat, you then have to go, right, there's the combat, hang on, let me shuffle my deck, draw some cards, right, now, let me think, I could put this card down here, but if I do this, I can do this combo, this I can play 3 cards at once, all good, and certainly playing the most cards that you can is generally a good idea, as long as you've got the card drawer to maintain it, but it's a very neat system. It just makes every combat feel very tactical. And yes, there's a bit of luck from drawing the cards from the deck, but it's certainly a lot less lucky than having to roll a die and see if you beat 4 to 6. And unfortunately, there is a bit of that in this game. But I really enjoy the combat system. Diplomacy works in a similar manner. You've basically got like a little cube that you move up and down the chart depending on what cards you play and the monster or the mob's reaction, for example. And diplomacy is good, but the problem I have with it is that, one, it doesn't really feel like a story element. It just feels like it's a variation on combat. And secondly, diplomacy is probably about 20% of this game, and combat is easily about 80%. So you're going to fight a lot more monsters and creatures than you are actual diplomacy encounters, which kind of makes the diplomacy attributes and stuff like that a little bit less useful than the main ones. Not to say they're useless. Believe me, the character I'm playing at the moment, Bjor, you know, certainly has a problem with, you know, diplomacy encounters at the moment, but, you know, he doesn't have any, like, empathy or whatever. But certainly, if he had less combat stats, I feel like I'd be getting screwed over a lot more. So you definitely kind of want to favor one or the other. As I mentioned, there is a bit of dice luck in this game, and that is a bit of an issue, because there's a lot of times in the book where you've got to roll like a d6 and add certain things, and then you roll it and add it to your thing, and get the total when you go to a certain paragraph. That's all well and good, but you can get really hosed if you don't roll high enough. And there are certain parts in this game where if you don't roll high enough, you will literally not be able to progress with the story. So you suddenly have to either go back and forth, suffering the negatives until you get a lucky roll, or you have to take time, go elsewhere, and build up your attributes so that you can do well in it. There are times when the luck can seriously hose you, and you just need to be comfortable with that. But this is not the biggest problem with the tactics and strategy here. There's this, what I like to call menhir maintenance. And this is where you've got these giant models, and they are really cool. They look fantastic. You know, I mean, it's not as big as my head, but still. And the idea is that these are dotted around the map, and you have to keep them maintained. They essentially are kind of like protectors from the darkness or the magic or whatever. And as soon as they tick down, they go away and you can't go to those locations and you have to try and activate them again. That would be good if you didn't have to activate them all the friggin' time. It's ridiculous. Think of MMOs, multiplayer, massive multiplayer online games, like World of Warcraft, for example, like one of the biggest ones there. And I used to play it a lot as a kid, but I lost a lot of hours to that. But when you imagine the grindiness in that, where you constantly have to sort of go, right, well, I need to do this quest. Well, I got to go kill 30 pigs. It's like the South Park episode where they got to grind 1 million pigs in order to get the experience and they do nothing in real life. It's a bit like that. But you have to basically do that in this game, because to activate them in here is you have to get resources and spend magic and wealth and action points, etc. And these only last for a good, 4 to 6 rounds typically, even in solo mode. Most you'll get is I think 7. They don't last very long. And you have to keep activating them all the time, because you've got these map cards that, the panoramic thing, and you might have to go, right, here's one location, then I go to this location, and then this one needs a men here. And then the next one's fine, and then I need another men here. And you can't even just go straight from A to B. You have to sort of go, right, there's my men here. I can go to this location. Right. Oh, I can't go any further, so I better go up here and activate this men here. Right, I can go back down. Oh, wait, I need to activate this men here. Right, but now I can go this way and then activate this men here. And then I can go here. And now I'm eventually at B.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
To get from one side of the map to the other, you sometimes have to activate 4 of these wretched things, and each one takes precious resources, which are not the easiest thing to get. There's only certain locations that will get you your food and your magic and wealth, and you constantly have to eat to stay alive each round, so that's already ticking down. And it gets very, very frustrating. The whole idea that a lot of my sort of tactical gameplay is based on a grind mechanic. It feels like it's been deliberately put in there to pad the game out, and it gets very frustrating very quickly. Going on to aesthetics, this is where it really starts to shine. The aesthetics and components in this game are beyond fantastic. The artwork is phenomenal. I mean, just your player board, this recessed player board with all the indentations and that, and a slightly pointless bit, that you take off just to show you your starting bits, put it back on. Nice, solid, love these. These are fantastic. The cards are good quality. I've sleeved mine because I got them in the Kickstarter, but even if you don't sleeve them, these are pretty sturdy cards and will last you a while. Miniatures, people seem to rag on the little ones, but personally I think they're fine, really. I think the little ones are pretty decent detailed. It's not like I could do a better job of it. But certainly the big one is, if you got the Kickstarter, you got a bunch of monster miniatures, which don't really serve a huge purpose, but they look great. However, everybody will get these nice funky menhirs, and it's like, oh yes, I love these things. These giant skeletal statues that basically just look ominous. I mean, they look dark and they're nasty, but these are sun drops, so they've had like a wash. Yeah, even the unpainted ones look phenomenal though. You really don't need to worry if you got painted or not. I mean, I like the fact that I got Sundrop, but I could have actually lived without it. I just splashed a bit of extra money on it. But these steal the show. Not all good though, because you are supposed to put, at the bottom of this, there's a slot where you put this coin in there. This is a metal one, there's plastic in there as well. But they're numbered around the side, so you can basically twist it to like how long the menhir is going to last. You pop it in there, and then you read the number and it tells you how long it's got to go. Well, firstly, it doesn't stay in there very easily. Secondly, you try reading this thing at a distance. It is like, so hard to read this thing when it's in the menhir. It's like, I can't quite tell. And secondly, when you've got the cards laid out, this thing just blocks line of sight. It's pure, like, the whole point of this thing is just to block your line of sight. And it gets a bit annoying. Not the end of the world, but yeah, it's like, I want to see the card behind it. Hang on a minute. And you've got to peer around this giant statue. So it's great, looks great, but does have some shortcomings. But artwork on the cards though, all those like giant poker-sized cards, well, bigger than poker-sized cards, these huge things that lay out this panoramic picture of a map of a world in turmoil. It looks so good. If only the location stayed on the board long enough before the menhirs ran out of juice, but that's another problem. But certainly when you're exploring the area, I love how the pictures join up. The monster cards look great. Basically, it's like a 10 out of 10 for aesthetics, in terms of, well, 9 out of 10, I suppose. They look phenomenal, even if they do have some fiddly functionality issues. So the immersion of theme, oh yeah, yeah, you're buying this a lot for that theme. I mean, I like Arthurian legend stuff in general, but this whole really dark, gritty version of it, where everything is not all happy-go-lucky, and the fact that you're playing a side character and not like one of the famous ones, but occasionally you meet some of those famous characters, it's such a good story. And exploring the locations is usually a highlight because you've got a lot of paragraphs to read in here of all these different locations, all this text, and it tells a very good, compelling story. You know, a lot of it, even though it's got the frustrating grinding mechanics at times, it pulls me back in because I want to get engrossed in this story. I want to know what happens next, you know, and I've gone through the campaign now, and it's a pretty satisfying campaign from a story perspective, even though at times it's a bit of a slog to get through it. And certainly I have noticed that the difficulty ratings can jump up quite a bit with this. So I would certainly recommend you take your time in the first few chapters, really build up your character, explore, go do your thing, you know, take your time and build up experience, get your decks improved, get some more attributes, then start steamrolling through the campaign. Because if you go too fast, the difficulty spikes in this game will punch you in the face before you realize it, and it's not like you can go back. But even just going to a random location that doesn't feel like it's got anything to do with the main plot, you know, you just find there was a timber wall, or the Horns of South, Mirror Lake, you know, just these random names for locations, and they'll have like 2 to 3 pages worth, you know, possibly even more of text and paragraphs, and depending on what choose your own adventure thing you do, what status you have, what character you're playing at times, it will direct you onto a different paragraph and you go through the story. And then finally, longevity. This will last you a long time, although why it's lasting you a long time is a bit more of an issue, because it will last you God knows how long. I mean, this is a 15-chapter campaign, and it's not an hour per chapter. Some of them can be finished quite quick, but some of them can take a long time, mostly because of the grinding. You know, one chapter might only take you 45 minutes to an hour, because it's nearby, you've got to do some exploring, but other than that, you're in a small area. But there are some that require you to just go off and get 2 or 3 statuses. Where do I get these statuses? You have not got the foggiest clue. It just basically says, go on. You know, mummy and daddy have to do stuff now. You know, you go out and play. And you just basically get sent out there to think, right, I need to get several statuses of helping the knights. How? It's like, where do I even begin? This will last you a good, say, 25 to 30 hours of solid, thematic, engrossing gameplay. But it will probably take you another 10 to 15 hours on top of that because of the slog grind. And it is frustrating. I have taken gaps from this game because I'm like, oh, do I really have to go through that slog anymore? But I want to find out what happens at the end of that scenario. I want to keep going. And so that pulls me back. But my God, if this didn't have the story to back it up, I would have probably scrapped this game ages ago. It would have been that much of an annoyance. So this is certainly going to give you all the hours of play that you want for the money that you're investing in this. It will take you a long time. If you've got expansion stuff coming, of course, that's even more content. You know, so this is definitely one that is going to last you a ton of time if you're happy with the fact that some of that is padding. My final word on Tainted Grail is that this is a hugely engrossing and thematic, gritty storyline based on the Arthurian legends. Looking amazing on the table, really sucking you into its theme. It is marred mostly, though, by grindy aspects that have been hijacked from online multiplayer games where it can test your patience a lot of the time. So, all in all, I really do enjoy this game, but it's going to lose a couple of marks for those grindy aspects and some of the luck involved. And so I think overall this one gets an 8 out of 10. It's a solid game and it definitely deserves its seal of endorsement from me, but if it just didn't have those MMO aspects of making those menhirs activate all the time, and if it doesn't bother you, if that's fine for you, then by all means, you're going to absolutely adore this game. I'm going to play through it more with like different characters and, you know, try different routes, because there's certainly plenty of paths you can take. And when the Wave 2 stuff comes through, I'm probably going to be playing that as well. But just gotta keep up with those wretched statues. How can you look so good and yet infuriate me so? Oh well, that's for another day. So that's Tainted Grail from Awakened Realms. If you like what you see, please subscribe to the channel, and of course check out my Patreon campaign and other videos for this year and previous years as well. Although, maybe don't go too far back because yeah, I don't look the best back in my old days. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and regardless of whether you've handed me Excalibur or you've driven me to the point of insanity of updating your rotten ran here's, it's still only a game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.